pretty good team.
That was pretty. It was
What
pretty
made
decent.
that team so good, you two?
Welcome back to Clark USA fans. Here's Clark, and wow, pulling up from beyond the logo like it's nothing, draining the shot, and casually adding a little swagger right after. The crowd erupts, the energy shifts, and in that moment you already know, this isn't just another highlight, this is a statement. And if you're still scrolling, stop right there, because what you're about to hear isn't just another media headline. This is a calculated move, a power shift. A moment that signals something much bigger happening behind the scenes of basketball. NBC didn't just decide to relaunch Sunday Night Basketball, they made a bold, almost shocking decision about how to do it. Instead of playing it safe, instead of relying only on nostalgia or familiar faces, they placed Caitlin Clark right at the center of it all. Not on the sidelines, not as a guest appearance, not as a halftime segment, but at the main desk. Prime time. Under the brightest lights in sports. Madison Square Garden. Lakers versus Knicks. A stage that has defined basketball history for decades. Think about that for a second. Lakers. Knicks. The Garden. The spotlight that has seen legends rise and icons cement their legacy. And right there, in the middle of it all, sits Caitlin Clark, not as a player this time, but as a voice shaping the conversation. That's not random. That's not coincidence. That's strategy. Because what NBC is doing here isn't just bringing back a broadcast, they're redefining what a basketball broadcast is. They're not chasing the past. They're building the future. And with one move, they made it clear, the future of basketball media isn't coming, it's already here. Now let's break this down, because the logic behind this decision is actually brilliant. Every legacy sports network today is facing the same problem. Their core audience is aging. The fans who grew up watching traditional pregame shows in the 90s and early 2000s are still there, still loyal, still watching, but they're not growing. Meanwhile, there's an entirely different audience exploding in size, a younger, digitally native generation that consumes sports completely differently. These fans don't sit through long pregame shows just because of tradition. They don't tune in for theme music or polished graphics. They live on highlights, on short clips, on social media. They follow players more than teams. They engage with personalities more than formats. And if you want their attention, you don't just need production value, you need someone they care about. And right now, there is no one more compelling in basketball than Caitlin Clark. What she's done over the past 2 years isn't just impressive, it's historic. She didn't just play college basketball, she transformed it. Regular season games became national events. Arenas filled up. Viewership skyrocketed. Records that stood untouched for decades suddenly started falling, one after another, like dominoes. Records people believed were untouchable gone. And then came the NCAA tournament. Her final run didn't just dominate headlines, it dominated all of sports. It became the most watched basketball event in America. Not just women's basketball. Not just college basketball. All of it. Men's included. When she declared for the WNBA draft, it wasn't just a draft anymore, it was a spectacle. Primetime attention. Massive buzz. And then her rookie season with the Indiana Fever? That wasn't just a season, it was a cultural moment. Attendance surged. TV ratings jumped by massive margins. Merchandise flew off shelves. Every game she played felt bigger, louder, more important. She didn't just move the needle, she broke it, rebuilt it, and pushed it even further. And here's the key detail a lot of people still underestimate. Her audience isn't limited to women's basketball fans. That's outdated thinking. Her reach goes way beyond that.
Caitlin.
NBA fans watch her. Casual sports fans watch her. Even people who don't follow basketball at all know her name. That kind of crossover appeal is rare. Extremely rare. It's the kind of influence that transcends the sport itself. NBC saw that early. They understood it at the deepest level. They saw what happened when she played record-breaking games. They saw fans go out of their way, people who had never even considered subscribing to a streaming platform, sign up just to watch her play. That's not normal. That's not even rare. That's something you almost never see. So when NBC had to decide who would help lead their billion-dollar NBA relaunch, the choice wasn't difficult. It wasn't even a debate. It was obvious. And when they finally rolled it out, they didn't hold back. Every detail was carefully planned. Every element designed to make an impact. This wasn't a quiet introduction, it was a statement. Madison Square Garden. Lakers versus Knicks. One of the biggest matchups you can put on a schedule. The kind of game that already guarantees attention. And then they add Caitlin Clark to the main desk. Not easing her in. Not testing the waters. Throwing her directly into the biggest stage possible. That's confidence. That's belief. That's knowing exactly what you have. And they didn't stop there. NBC stacked the night with star power. Legends. Hall of Famers. Big names that define basketball history. And right alongside them, Caitlin Clark. Sharing the same space. The same spotlight. The same moment. Think about what that represents. After more than 2 decades away from NBA broadcasting, NBC returns, and one of the first major faces they put forward in this new era is her. That says everything. When she sat at that desk, it became immediately clear she belonged there. She wasn't overwhelmed. She wasn't out of place. She was confident, composed, and completely natural. She spoke about the energy of Madison Square Garden, describing the atmosphere, the intensity, the unique buzz that makes it different from any other arena. She broke down the game with real insight. Not surface-level commentary, but actual understanding. The kind that makes experienced analysts nod in agreement. The kind that shows she's not just a player, she's a student of the game. And people noticed. Teammates reacted. Fans reacted. Analysts reacted. The conversation quickly shifted from "this is interesting" to "this makes perfect sense." Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about one appearance. It's about what it represents. It represents a shift in how sports media works. A shift toward personalities who can connect across platforms, across audiences, across generations. A shift toward authenticity, relatability, and influence. Caitlin Clark isn't just part of that shift, she's leading it. And NBC knows it. That's why they didn't hesitate. That's why they didn't play it safe. That's why they didn't wait. They made their move. And now, the rest of the sports world is watching.
Gustafsson, too much.
Today, everyone is calling it NBC's big comeback, but let's be real, this isn't just about a network returning to basketball. This is about a shift in power, and right at the center of it is Caitlin Clark. And if you know anything about her, you already understand one thing very clearly: she doesn't lose quietly. She doesn't accept defeat. She doesn't walk away. And that mindset? It showed up in a way nobody expected, not during the game, not during the broadcast, but behind the scenes, where the real story unfolded. Days later, details started to surface from a podcast appearance that gave fans a rare look into who Caitlin Clark really is when the cameras aren't fully rolling. According to Sarah Chavnik, the director behind that segment, something small, but incredibly telling happened during a casual on-set game. Clark was matched up against a seasoned NBA veteran in a lighthearted shooting challenge. It was supposed to be simple. 1 round. Fun content. Quick segment. Move on. But that's not how Caitlin Clark operates. She lost the first round. And instead of laughing it off or playing along for the sake of the show, she immediately turned to the producers and said, "No, best of 3. Now here's the thing, there was no plan for a best of 3. The segment wasn't built for that. The schedule didn't account for it. But none of that mattered to her. Because in that moment, it wasn't about production. It wasn't about timing. It wasn't about content. It was about competition. Pure, unfiltered competition. She refused to let that loss be the final version of the story. And that one moment told you everything you need to know about her. This isn't someone who acts competitive when the spotlight is on. This isn't someone performing intensity because it looks good on camera. This is someone who is wired that way at the deepest level. It's instinct. It's identity. It's who she is whether millions are watching or nobody is. But what made this story even more powerful wasn't just her refusal to lose, it was what came next. Sarah Chavnik added something that stuck with a lot of people. She said that over the years, she's learned to judge athletes not by what they do on camera, but by how they treat the people behind the scenes, the crew, the staff, the ones who don't get recognition. And when she talked about Caitlin Clark, her words carried weight. She said Clark is the kind of person you could meet as your hero and walk away without disappointment. Think about that in today's world, where hype often doesn't match reality, where public image and private behavior don't always align. That statement matters. It tells you that what we see from Caitlin Clark, the fire, the focus, the confidence, that's not an act. It's real. And it extends beyond the court. And then came the numbers. Because at the end of the day, in media, numbers don't lie. The Lakers versus Knicks game that night didn't just perform well, it exploded. Millions of viewers tuned in across NBC and Telemundo, making it the most watched Sunday night regular season NBA game in over 2 decades, excluding only the biggest calendar events like opening night and Christmas. That's not a coincidence. That's impact. The game itself delivered, fast-paced, intense, filled with big moments. The Knicks secured the win, but the real story wasn't just the final score. It was the atmosphere. From start to finish, the broadcast felt alive. Electric. Different. Like something new had entered the space. And just days later, NBC President Rick Cordella was asked the question everyone was thinking: was this a one-time thing, or is Caitlin Clark going to be a bigger part of this going forward? His answer said everything without needing to say too much. He pointed to her existing ties with Comcast and Xfinity, referred to her as part of the family, and made it clear this is only the beginning. That's not PR talk. That's positioning. Because what happened that night wasn't a guest appearance, it was an audition. And not just any audition, one she had already passed before most people even realized it was happening. Now imagine what this is going to look like moving forward. Picture the desk. Not just analysts, but icons. Legends of the game. Players who defined eras. You've got Vince Carter, one of the most explosive athletes the sport has ever seen, a man whose dunks didn't just score points, they became history. A player who once jumped over a 7-footer on the Olympic stage and made it look effortless. Next to him, Tracy McGrady. A scorer so naturally gifted that the game looked easy in his hands. A player who could create shots from anywhere on the floor, often without even appearing to try. Smooth. Effortless. Deadly. Then there's Carmelo Anthony, one of the greatest pure scorers in NBA history. The master of the mid-range. The jab step technician. A player whose offensive skill set has been studied and respected across generations. And sitting right there with them, Caitlin Clark. The same player who pulls up from the logo like it's a routine shot. The same player whose court vision is so advanced that even seasoned professionals pause and rewind to understand what they just saw. The same player redefining what range, creativity, and confidence look like in modern basketball. Now think about the conversations that are about to happen in that environment. Imagine her asking Carmelo to break down the details of his footwork and him diving deep into it, not as a lecture, but as a real exchange between equals. Imagine Vince Carter genuinely curious about her shooting range, asking how she generates that kind of power from distances most players wouldn't even attempt. Imagine Tracy McGrady and Caitlin Clark comparing approaches to creating space, his smooth isolation game meeting her fearless, fast-paced attack. These aren't fantasy scenarios. These are real possibilities. Real conversations that NBC is actively building toward. And every single one of them has the potential to go viral within minutes. Because what people connect with today isn't just analysis, it's authenticity. It's respect. It's seeing greatness recognize greatness. And then there's another layer to this that has people talking, the hint dropped by producer Sam Flood. He mentioned that they're planning to have Caitlin Clark with a basketball in her hands on set. Now on the surface, that might sound simple. But think about it, why highlight that specifically unless there's something more planned? The theories are everywhere. Maybe she breaks down her shooting mechanics live. Maybe she demonstrates her range in real time. Maybe it turns into a spontaneous shooting challenge with a legend stepping in. And then there's the theory that's gaining the most traction, the possibility of her debuting her Nike signature shoe live on national television at Madison Square Garden. If that happens, it wouldn't just be a product launch, it would be a moment. The kind of moment that defines eras. Because when you combine her influence, that stage, and that audience, you're not just releasing a shoe. You're creating history. And yet, even with all this momentum, there will still be critics. There always are. People who say she's too young, that she hasn't earned the spot, that she lacks experience in broadcasting. But those arguments fall apart the moment you actually look at her journey. Because Caitlin Clark hasn't just been playing basketball, she's been performing on the biggest stages, under the brightest lights, with the highest expectations for years. She's been in front of cameras since high school. She's handled pressure that most athletes never experience. She's carried the weight of entire broadcasts, entire tournaments, entire conversations. This isn't new territory for her. This is just the next level. And what NBC understands, what a lot of people are just starting to realize, is that Caitlin Clark isn't just a player. She's not just a star. She's a force, a connector, a bridge between generations of fans, between traditional media and digital culture, between the past of basketball and its future. And now, she's not just changing the game on the court. She's changing how the game is seen, discussed, and experienced. And this is only the beginning.
Indiana's going to have to try to win this a second time here after that brilliant first half. Oh, Clark.
When you talk about dominance, when you talk about influence, when you talk about a player who didn't just rise through the system but completely reshaped it, you're talking about Caitlin Clark, the undeniable queen of college basketball. A generational talent who carried the same fearless, electric style from her high school days straight into the national spotlight and never once looked overwhelmed by the moment. From the very beginning, there was something different about her game, something that separated her from everyone else. Not just the deep shooting range, not just the flashy passes, but the confidence, the control. The understanding that she wasn't just playing in the game, she was controlling it. And that same presence, that same command, has now translated seamlessly into the world of media, where most athletes struggle to find their footing, but where she looks like she's been preparing for it her entire life. We've already seen glimpses of this transition, and every single time, she hasn't just met expectations, she's completely blown past them. Take her alternate broadcast during the Final Four, a Manning cast-style setup where the pressure isn't just about analysis, but about personality, timing, and the ability to keep an audience engaged in real time. For most first-timers, that environment can feel overwhelming, awkward even. But not for her. She stepped into that role and delivered something that felt natural, insightful, and genuinely entertaining. Not good for her age. Not impressive for a beginner. Just flat out good. She was sharp with her observations, quick with her reactions, comfortable in her delivery, and most importantly, she made people want to keep watching. That's a rare skill, and it's one that can't be taught easily. And it didn't stop there. She stepped into the New York Yankees broadcast booth, an entirely different environment, a different sport, a different audience, and once again, she held her own alongside seasoned professionals who have spent years mastering their craft. There was no hesitation, no uncertainty, no moment where she looked out of place. That level of adaptability tells you something critical. This isn't a one-dimensional talent. This is someone who understands how to communicate, how to connect, and how to carry herself in any spotlight she steps into. Over time, through countless interviews, press conferences, and media appearances, she has built a reputation for being composed, articulate, and completely at ease under pressure. While many athletes take years to grow into that comfort, she already operates at a level that veterans aim to reach. And that confidence isn't forced. It's rooted in something deeper, her understanding of the game. Because beyond the charisma, beyond the presence, beyond the attention she commands, there's her basketball IQ, and it's off the charts. This is not someone who gives surface-level takes or generic commentary. Caitlin Clark sees the game differently. She processes it differently. She breaks it down with a level of detail that mirrors how elite quarterbacks read defenses in football, anticipating movements, recognizing patterns, understanding spacing, timing, angles, and opportunities before they fully develop. That kind of vision is rare even among top-tier professionals, and it's exactly what makes her perspective so valuable in a broadcast setting. When she talks about the game, she's not just describing what's happening, she's explaining why it's happening and what's about to happen next. And for viewers, especially those who crave deeper insight, that's incredibly compelling. It transforms the viewing experience from passive to engaging. It makes you feel smarter just by listening. And that's exactly what NBC is tapping into. Because let's be honest, traditional sports pre-game shows have started to feel repetitive. The same formats, the same discussions, the same predictable takes from the same voices. There's a level of familiarity there, but also a level of stagnation. And in an era where audiences crave authenticity and freshness, that's a problem. Caitlin Clark changes that instantly. She brings something that can't be manufactured or replicated, the perspective of an active elite athlete who plays a style that mirrors the modern evolution of basketball. High-volume three-point shooting, fast-paced offense, creative playmaking, floor spacing, decision-making under pressure. She doesn't just understand this era of basketball, she defines it through her own play. And that makes her the perfect voice to analyze it. But the impact of this move goes far beyond just improving a broadcast. It reaches into something much bigger, the relationship between the NBA and the WNBA. For years, those two leagues have existed almost like separate worlds. Different audiences, different conversations, limited overlap. But by placing one of the most recognizable faces in women's basketball at the center of an NBA broadcast.
Everything but the bucket that time for Phoenix.
NBC is doing something powerful. They're building a bridge. They're introducing her to audiences who may have never watched a WNBA game. They're showing casual NBA fans that she doesn't just belong in the conversation, she elevates it. And once those fans see her break down plays, analyze strategies, and speak with authority about the game at its highest level, something shifts. Perception changes. Curiosity grows, and suddenly, her own games become more interesting to a much wider audience. That's not just smart, it's strategic at the highest level. It's cross-promotion done right. And the ripple effects of that decision are going to benefit both leagues for years to come. But what might be even more impressive than the media impact is the business awareness behind it all. Because here's the reality, Caitlin Clark is only at the beginning of her professional playing career. She's just getting started. And yet, she's already laying the foundation for something much bigger than basketball. Most athletes follow a traditional path. They focus entirely on playing, spend years building their careers on the court, and only start thinking about media opportunities once retirement becomes a reality. At that point, they try to transition, often competing for limited roles with little experience. But she's flipping that model completely. She's building her playing career and her media presence at the same time. She's taking advantage of the spotlight while it's at its brightest. She's opening doors while they're wide open. That level of foresight is rare, especially at her age. It shows an understanding not just of the game, but of the industry around it. And when you look at her partnerships, it becomes even clearer how intentional this all is. Her connection with Xfinity, which operates under Comcast, the parent company of NBC, creates a natural alignment. This isn't a random opportunity. It's a carefully structured ecosystem where every move supports the next. NBC benefits from her star power. Comcast strengthens its investment. And she gains access to a platform that reaches millions. It's a win across the board. And every moment she spends on that broadcast desk isn't just content, it's an investment. An investment in a future that could extend far beyond her playing days. Because in today's world, athlete branding isn't linear anymore. It's not about waiting your turn. It's about building simultaneously, creating momentum in multiple directions at once. Every standout performance she delivers on television draws more viewers to her games. Every dominant performance on the court draws more attention to her voice off it. It becomes a cycle, a flywheel of influence that keeps accelerating. And once that cycle gains enough speed, it becomes incredibly difficult to stop. But beyond all the strategy, beyond the numbers, beyond the business moves, there's something deeper at the heart of this story, something human. Because at the end of the day, Caitlin Clark is still that kid from Des Moines, Iowa. Not a traditional sports powerhouse. Not a place known for producing global superstars. Just a young girl who fell in love with basketball, who spent hours watching games, studying players, dreaming about being part of something bigger. And now she's not just part of it, she's shaping it. She's gone from watching the game on a screen to being on the other side of it, influencing how it's discussed, how it's understood, and how it's experienced by millions of people. And somewhere out there right now, there's another young girl sitting in a small town, watching her on television, seeing what's possible, and starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, she can follow that same path. That's impact. That's influence. That's legacy. So when the lights come on at Madison Square Garden, when the cameras go live, when the music fades and the broadcast begins, don't just focus on the game. Don't just listen to the analysis. Pay attention to the shift happening right in front of you. Because this isn't just a debut. This is a statement. A statement about where basketball is going. About who controls the narrative. About what the future of sports media looks like. And when it's all said and done, the real question won't be whether Caitlin Clark belonged in that moment. It will be something much bigger. Who does the game belong to now?